My name is Henrietta Cole, and I'm 78 years old. For the past decade, every Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock sharp, I've sat in the same armchair by the bay window of my old cedar-shingled home, watching the driveway. Always with a fresh plate of snickerdoodles on the coffee table, the same recipe my grandchildren once begged for whenever they visited. The house smelled of cinnamon and sugar. The curtains were pulled just enough for me to see the street. The tea kettle would whistle at exactly 1:45, and I'd pour it into the chipped floral teapot I'd used since the day my daughter Elaine moved out. I'd sit and I'd wait. Some Sundays I'd catch the sound of a car in the distance, my heart leaping, only to watch a neighbor's truck drive past without slowing. Other Sundays there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the old clock on the wall, marking time I couldn't get back. They promised they'd visit. Every time I spoke to Elaine on the phone, she said, "We'll come by next weekend, Mom. The kids would love to see you." And I'd believe her. Plan for it. Bake. I'd clean the house, fluff the cushions, even polish the silver teaspoons. And every time the cookies went cold. The worst part wasn't the disappointment. It was the hope. Hope is heavier than grief because you carry it longer, and it fools you into thinking it's a gift when it's really just a chain. Last Sunday was no different. The plate of cookies sat untouched. I sipped my tea until it turned lukewarm. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn, and the clock chimed 4. I stood, gathered the cookies into a tin, and set them on the kitchen counter for the mailman. He'd started getting used to the leftovers. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the quiet pressing in around me like a weight. The house felt too big for one person, too full of echoes that didn't answer back. And that's when a thought, sharp, clear, and undeniable, took root. Maybe it was time for someone else to live here. Someone who wouldn't let the cookies go cold. I didn't know exactly what that meant yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to spend another year watching an empty driveway. And the very next morning, a knock at my door would set everything in motion. The knock that would come the next morning hadn't happened yet, but it was already pressing against my thoughts like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. Before I tell you what happened when I opened that door, you need to understand how I got here. How I became the woman who sat by the window every Sunday with cookies that never got eaten. It wasn't always like this. I was 30 when my husband, Robert, died in a mill accident. One minute he was promising to fix the fence before supper, and the next a foreman was standing on my porch, holding his hard hat in both hands like it weighed the world. I was left with a mortgage, a 4-year-old daughter, and a grief that was too big to fit into the walls of our little cedar-shingled house. I remember sitting at the kitchen table that night, staring at Robert's chair. It was still pulled out just a bit from breakfast. His coffee cup sat in the sink with a ring of milk dried at the bottom. Elaine, my little girl, padded into the kitchen wearing her yellow nightgown, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Is Daddy working late?" she asked. I swallowed hard, forcing the tears down because I didn't want her to see me break. "No, baby," I said softly. "Daddy had to go be with God." I told myself in that moment that I'd give Elaine everything I could, that she would never feel the lack of love, even if she felt the lack of him. I took a job at the post office during the day and cleaned offices at night. I learned how to patch leaky pipes, change the oil in my car, and stretch a pot of stew into 4 meals. Every extra dollar went toward making Elaine's life better. Ballet classes, a second-hand clarinet when she wanted to join the school band, a dress for senior prom that we found at a consignment store and altered together at the kitchen table. When she got accepted to the University of Tennessee, I cried for an hour straight in the pantry so she wouldn't see. Not because I didn't want her to go, but because I knew I'd miss her so fiercely it would feel like losing Robert all over again. I worked double shifts to cover what her scholarship didn't. sent her grocery money every month, drove 4 hours each way just to see her in a one-act play her sophomore year. And when she met David, tall, polite, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, I welcomed him in. I made his favorite cornbread, mended his shirts when he didn't have time to take them to the dry cleaner, and watched the way he sometimes interrupted Elaine when she talked. I told myself it was nothing. When their first child, Jacob, was born, I was there before the epidural wore off, holding his tiny hand and whispering the same lullabies I used to sing to Elaine. 2 years later came Marcy, wild-haired and quick to giggle. My world revolved around them. Every birthday I baked their favorite cakes. Every Christmas I knit them new scarves. Every summer I filled the freezer with homemade popsicles so they'd have something sweet after playing in the yard. And then, slowly, the visits started thinning out. First it was, "The kids have soccer games this weekend, Mom, maybe next Sunday." Then, "We're swamped with work right now, Mom, but soon." Then, "It's such a long drive for just a couple hours. How about you come to us?" I went when I could, though I couldn't drive at night anymore. But even when I made the trip, I could feel it. The way David's smile was tighter, how Elaine seemed distracted, glancing at her phone while I talked. One Thanksgiving, I stood at the stove stirring gravy while they whispered in the dining room. I caught just enough to know they were talking about cutting back on visits because it was too much for the kids. Too much for the kids. Too much to drive an hour to see the woman who raised their mother and loved them like the sun rose just for them. I told myself they were busy, that life gets hectic, that it wasn't personal. But when the calls got shorter, when the birthdays became phone calls instead of visits, when Christmas morning came with a package left on the porch instead of laughter in my living room, the hope started to feel like a stone in my chest. And still, every Sunday at 2 o'clock I waited. Until one Sunday bled into the next. And years passed like that. And then, on a morning I never expected, it all began to change with a single, unexpected knock. It was Monday morning, cool and gray. The kind of day that makes you want to pull a blanket around your shoulders and forget the world exists. I was in the kitchen rinsing my teacup when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks on the front door. For a moment my heart leapt. I thought maybe, just maybe, Elaine had decided to surprise me the way she used to when the kids were little. I dried my hands on the dish towel and hurried to the door, but when I opened it, it wasn't my daughter or my grandchildren standing there. It was a young woman I didn't recognize, holding the hand of a boy who looked to be about 7. Behind them, a man stood at the bottom step, his arm around a toddler with curls the color of wheat. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman began, her voice warm but cautious. "I'm Nora. This is my husband, Lucas. We just moved into the rental down on Birch Street and, well, our heat's out. The landlord says it might be a couple days. I was wondering if you knew anyone who had space heaters for sale. Or maybe for loan." Her words tumbled out quickly, like she wasn't sure if she was asking too much. I glanced at the boy beside her. His nose was red from the cold, and he clutched a fraying scarf in one hand. The toddler in Lucas's arms had flushed cheeks and a sleepy look. Without thinking, I said, "Wait here." I went to the hall closet and pulled out the 2 small space heaters Robert and I had bought years ago when the furnace had given us trouble. They still worked fine. I used them in the sunroom in winter sometimes. I brought them to the door and set them on the porch. Nora's eyes lit up. "Oh, thank you. We can pay you." I waved her off. "No need. Just bring them back when you're done." Lucas shifted the toddler and extended his free hand to shake mine. "That's awfully kind of you, ma'am. Most folks these days don't even answer the door for strangers." I almost told him I knew all about people not answering or showing up when they should. But instead I just smiled and said, "Cold has a way of making neighbors out of all of us." They left with thanks tumbling from their lips, the boy giving me a shy wave as they walked down the sidewalk. I closed the door, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, useful. 3 days later, they came back to return the heaters. This time, Nora brought a basket of still warm blueberry muffins as thanks. The smell filled the house in a way that made it feel alive again. We stood in the doorway talking for almost an hour. She told me about the move, how Lucas had lost his job in Ohio, and how they'd taken the first place they could find near his new work at the auto shop. They didn't have family nearby. The boy, Jamie, asked if he could use the bathroom. When he came out, he looked around the living room with wide eyes. "Your house smells like cookies," he said. I laughed. "That's because I bake them every Sunday." Nora's smile softened. "Every Sunday?" "Yes," I said. "For my family. Though they haven't been around much lately." She hesitated, then said, "Well, maybe one Sunday we could be your family. Just for the day." It was meant lightly, but the words hit me in a place I'd tried to ignore for years. I didn't say yes right away. But the next Sunday, when 2 o'clock came and my driveway was empty, I found myself pulling extra chairs to the table and setting out a fresh plate of snickerdoodles. That day someone knocked. And this time I didn't feel the weight of hope. I felt the warmth of company. That first Sunday with Nora's family was quiet in a way that didn't feel lonely. Jamie sat at the table swinging his legs under the chair, asking about every cookie on the plate like each one had its own story. The toddler, whose name was Lily, grinned around a mouthful of chocolate chip and left tiny handprints on the edge of the table. Lucas offered to pour the tea, his big hands surprisingly gentle with my delicate china cups. They stayed for nearly 2 hours. We talked about everything from recipes to the best place to buy fresh apples in the county. When they left, the air in the house didn't feel heavy. It felt lived in. The next Sunday they came back. This time, with a jar of homemade strawberry jam and a bunch of daffodils Lucas had picked from the yard of the rental before Nora could stop him. "It's spring," he said, shrugging, "and flowers should be enjoyed, not just left outside to wilt." By the third Sunday, it wasn't just tea and cookies anymore. I roasted a chicken, Nora brought roasted carrots, and Lucas baked his mother's cornbread. We ate like we'd known each other for years. That night, after they left, I sat in my armchair by the window. But this time I wasn't looking at the driveway, waiting for someone who wouldn't come. I was remembering the sound of Jamie laughing so hard milk came out of his nose. I was remembering Lily's tiny hand wrapped around my finger. It had been years since I felt that kind of warmth in this house. And the truth was, it didn't come from my daughter or my grandchildren. It came from people who had no reason to love me except that they wanted to. The shift was slow, but it was steady. I stopped checking my phone for texts from Elaine. I stopped planning my Sundays around the hope of her arrival. And when I baked cookies, I did it for the people who actually showed up to eat them. Then, in early summer, a card arrived in the mail from Elaine. Not handwritten, printed from one of those online stationery companies. It was a Happy Mother's Day card with a generic message about thinking of you, and hope all is well. There was no mention of visiting, no invitation to see the kids, just a signature at the bottom. Love, Elaine. I set it on the counter and stared at it for a long while. The woman who used to call me twice a week now only managed a printed card, mailed without even her handwriting. That same afternoon Nora called. "Henrietta, it's Lucas's birthday next Sunday. We were wondering if you'd come over for dinner. The kids want you there." I didn't even hesitate. "I'll be there," I said. Sitting at their table the following week, with Lily on my lap trying to feed me bits of her cake and Jamie proudly showing me the fort he'd built in the living room, I realized something. I'd been saving this house, my time, and my love for people who didn't value any of it. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to give it to the people who did. I didn't say it out loud that night. Not yet. But the seed was planted. And once it took root, it started growing fast. By August, the decision was no longer a whisper in my head. It was a full voice, steady and calm. I'd spent enough years preserving this house like it was some kind of family heirloom, waiting for my daughter to reclaim a bond she clearly didn't want. One hot afternoon I called Mr. Franklin, the local attorney who'd helped Robert and me with our wills years ago. "I'd like to make some changes," I told him. He didn't ask why, just told me to come by. When I sat in his cool wood-paneled office, I slid a folder across the desk, deed, tax documents, and a note in my handwriting. "I want to transfer my house," I said. "Not after I'm gone. To the wards." His eyebrows lifted. "Family. Better," I said. "Neighbors who've shown up when it mattered." It took a few weeks to sort out the paperwork, but when I walked out of that office with the documents signed and sealed, I felt lighter than I had in decades. I didn't tell Nora and Lucas right away. I wanted the moment to be something they'd never forget, because I knew I wouldn't. The next Sunday I set the table with my best china and made 3 batches of cookies. Chocolate chip for Jamie, snickerdoodle for Lily, and peanut butter for Lucas. The house smelled like the home I'd always hoped it would be for my own family, but this time I wasn't waiting for them. When Nora's family arrived, I asked them to sit in the living room. I handed them each a glass of sweet tea and an envelope. "What's this?" Lucas asked. "Just open it," I said. Nora slid the papers out, her brow furrowed as she read. Then her eyes widened. "Henrietta, this says." "It says this house is yours now," I finished for her. "No strings. No rent. No mortgage. Just yours." Lucas looked stunned. Jamie's mouth dropped open like he understood exactly how big this was, even if he didn't know all the words for it. Nora shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "We can't." "You can," I said. "You already have. You've made this house a home again. I'd rather see it full of laughter while I'm alive than empty after I'm gone." They cried. Lily clapped her hands because everyone else was making noise, and Jamie hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. Word got out faster than I expected. 2 days later, Elaine called. No greeting, just, "You gave away the house?" "I did," I said, my voice steady. "To strangers?" she demanded. I thought of Nora's warm muffins, Lucas fixing the loose step on my porch without being asked, Jamie helping me carry in groceries, Lily's little hand in mine. "No," I said quietly. "To family." There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. "You've lost your mind." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just stopped losing years waiting for people who never came." I hung up before she could answer. That Sunday I sat by the window one last time. Not waiting, just watching. Across the yard, Jamie was tossing a ball for Lily while Lucas painted the front porch railing. Nora waved at me through the kitchen window as she pulled a tray of something warm from the oven. The plate of cookies on my table wasn't for anyone who might not show up. It was for the people who were already here. And for the first time in decades, the house felt exactly like it should. Alive, loved, and full of voices that actually belonged.